Today we're going to talk about patterns, in particular repetition. Now, repetition as a pattern is seen all around us in the world, in both the natural world and the world that humans create. It's a common pattern we'd like to use. In fact, there's a good chance that something you're wearing right now is making use of the pattern of repetition. Now, in poetry, there are certain devices that, by definition, make use of repetition, anaphora, epistrophe, rhyme, just to name a few. But today we're not going to speak about those. Repetition is a part of them. That's what makes it anaphora. Instead, we're going to look at other ways that authors use repetition. So one way is repeating the same word over and over again in succession. So take a look at the two poems here. You can see in the bells that the word tinkle, 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 and then later bells, bells, bells is repeated. And what these do is they help to add focus to the sound that the bells are making and the focus on the bells themselves. And in addition, by repeating that word bells, 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 it almost sounds a little bit like the chiming of a bell. Look at the second poem. Here, the words captain and heart, heart, heart are repeated, and it serves to reveal the tone of the speaker. Clearly, he's very passionate about this captain. Now, another way, however, that words or phrases can be repeated is across poems, so not in succession, but throughout the poem itself. Take a look at the two poems here. In the first one, Education for Leisure, notice that pronoun I is repeated throughout the poem. In fact, it's repeated 16 times, and that serves to let us know a bit more about the speaker. He's egocentric. He thinks a lot about himself. He's completely focused on himself and his needs. Look at the second poem. There we see two phrases repeated. Do not go gentle into that good night, and rage, rage against the dying of the light. And it's through that repetition that the urgency of those two imperatives comes forth. Clearly, he feels very strongly about the subject of his poem, in this case, Dylan Thomas's father, not going gentle into that good night and raging against the dying of the light. And those phrases take on more of that urgency as you read through the poem. Now, another way that authors can use repetition isn't just the repetition of the same words or phrases, but repetition of the same ideas with slight variations in the words. So let's take a look at in Mrs. Tilsher's class, that first poem. You can see all those words that are highlighted in yellow are helping to convey the idea of the speaker feeling uncomfortable, to say the least. And by using this type of repetition where there's minor variations, the uncomfortability develops. It's not simply a minor discomfort, but clearly this person is feeling quite bad, and it's almost visceral in a sense. In Dulce et Decorum Est, these repeated words in blue are highlighting these soldiers as they move, the condition that they're in. And whereas maybe just that first line, bent double like old beggars under sacks, might convey the idea of how exhausted they are, it's through the repetition of the idea and the slight variations that they're coughing, they're limping, they're drunk with fatigue, that we realize the extent of their exhaustion. In To Autumn, I've highlighted in purple all the words that indicate the abundance of the growth of the fruits and the vegetables. And again, through that, it adds focus to that central idea, but it also creates more imagery for us where we can actually see the branches bending with the plump, sweet kernels that are budding and even over-brimming. These are, now there's another way that the authors can use repetition, and that's through punctuation. Of course, you're going to find a lot of repetition of commas and full stops. So what you want to look for are question marks and exclamation points, those pieces of punctuation that are rarer. So in the first poem, Still I Rise, notice how many questions the speaker puts forth. And what this does is, this helps to reinforce this idea of the speaker challenging someone and lets us know that she's not just tentatively challenged people, but she's doing it throughout the poem. She feels very strong. In the second example, notice that there's a repetition of exclamation points. And what that does in the context of this poem is it helps to develop that anguish or despair of the speaker, where one punctuation point probably would have demonstrated his frustration, but it's through this repetition that we realize the extent of that anguish. These are just a few examples of how authors use repetition in poetry. Now that you know what to look for, go out and find how repetition is being used in poems around you.